Welcome to the Bottom Line Podcast with Nicholas Kuzmich, where we discuss what matters most, the bottom line, featuring the top minds in their industry. Now, let's get started.
Hey everybody, Nicholas Kuzmich here from the Bottom Line Podcast, where we speak with industry leaders and what I call sleepers to discuss what matters most, and that is the bottom line. Now, of course, when I talk about the bottom line, I'm not just talking about profits and numbers, although those can be important. But what I mean by that is like the bottom line of what actually matters most to individuals and humans and collectiveness and all that. Past guests include Paula Telfer, the CEO and co-founder of Sense.ai, James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy, and so many more, all of which you can listen to however you listen to podcasts or watch podcasts. This episode specifically is brought to you by Awaken with Five. This is an experience that my wife and I facilitate every week, where we bring people through what could be called a consciousness expanding experience with the God molecule. To learn more, you can go to awakenwith5, the number 5.com. Now, Scott, usually at this point in the podcast, I usually like to thank the person who introduced us for the sake of us being able to have a conversation here. But I realized nobody really did that. I think I was on Instagram, I saw, or maybe YouTube, and I saw one of your famous videos of someone coming out of the cave after an experience. And I'm sure you hear this all the time, but there was something inside of me that just said, I don't even fully know what this is, but I got to do it. And so I reached out and I said, when's your next opportunity? To which I thought, oh, I could come next month and have this experience. And then you have a wait list for approximately 3 years. So that's another thing that I want to talk about. But first and foremost, the work you're doing is amazing. Thank you for taking time to speak to us. Rather than me reading off some generic kind of biography, maybe I'll just turn it to you and say, in your own words, and you can expand as long or as little as you like, because I know this would probably lead to some questions. Who are you? What do you do? And maybe a little bit about your experience to start, or your experiences that you host to start.
Sure. So we're in Southern Oregon. My wife and I have 400 acres out here in Southern Oregon. We started hosting dark retreats in 2020.
Yeah.
We built our first dark retreat in 2018, took a couple of years. The first one we built was made out of cob, mud, sand, and straw. So it took some time to build, some time to dry. We started in March, April of 2020.
Wow.
To, I guess, go back for a second. Well, I guess to just touch on what a dark retreat is briefly, is when somebody goes into a space that is completely devoid of light. Your eyes do not adjust to see your hand in front of your face. With that said, one of the first things that people come to when they're in the dark is like, whoa, the darkness is not really dark. Like it's scintillating. There's an aliveness. It's not devoid of life. It is devoid of light, although some people see lights, but that's something we could kind of talk about as we get into it.
Yeah.
And ours are unique in that they're very quiet. We couldn't say they're totally soundproof, but like 95% of the time it is soundproof and totally quiet. And that's another element that people don't realize when they come in. There's a double door where we pass through food to people so that it's sealed when they get and receive their food. And there's conversations that we have through the wall every morning and evening. There's a check-in, we touch in and drop in for 15 minutes to sometimes an hour. And there's also a 2-hour somatic-based prep session that happens before they go in with my other teammate, Adrian, and then when they come out to integrate. And I did my first dark retreat in 2012. Prior to that, I had spent a lot of time alone off in the mountains, mostly in southern Baja.
Right.
Over the course of 6-7 years, I probably spent 2.5 years in solitude.
Wow.
It was a more unique time in my life. And somebody mentioned a darkness retreat to me. And I was like, well, that is right up my alley. And so in 2012, my wife and I blacked out our house and we did our first dark retreat together.
No kidding.
And I was pretty moved, and I was like, I need to do it alone. So I went back down to Baja. I finished building this little earthbag dome, and I went in there for 10 days in 2013 and did my first solo dark retreat.
Wow.
And I was quite, I was humbled.
Hmm.
I went in definitely with a spiritual ego. I've spent so much time alone. I love being alone. I could sit on the same rock and meditate for 12, 14 hours a day and just be totally delighted. And it is a different orientation in the dark
Hmm.
from what I have found in my own experience and in witnessing probably close to 500 people who have come through here over the years. There's really no amount of meditation experience,
Okay.
solitude, seclusion, retreats, plant medicine, breath work, cold exposure. There's just really nothing that prepares somebody for a darkness retreat. Like it just doesn't matter. It can be helpful, but it's not necessarily helpful. It can actually be a hindrance. And so it's not
Right.
necessarily the meditation experience, the plant medicine, any of that, that like it's more like how people orient within it that may be beneficial or may actually like add layers of camouflage. And it tends to overall add more level layers of camouflage. Like
Right.
the
To
darkness
work through.
retreat, kind of in the words of Meister Eckhart, the soul grows not by addition, but by subtraction. And so if we're adding experiences, if we're meditating to get something, to get
Hmm.
somewhere, to awaken, to transform, to heal, to fix, to like have something that has us feeling purposeful or
Yep.
self-important. And again, not that anything's wrong with any of that. It's just when that is our orientation, and then we take that all away, we're left with ultimately why we were doing that in the first place, because we don't want to feel the hollowness, the lack that's there. And so there's this movement which can be sincere and meaningful. And it also tends to be hidden and blind, though, that there's ultimately this movement to cover the lack.
Right.
And so one of the membranes that everyone in the dark comes up against, some people bounce right off it and they're doing a million different things to distract themselves unknowingly. Others, the pressure is so much they're aware of like, whoa, I'm under a lot of pressure. But the membrane that everyone comes up against and that some pass through is this sense of lack, this
Hmm.
sense of helplessness. And there's like everything in our psyche, in our enculturated way, that is like having us look the other way, especially as a man, like being afraid, admitting that you're afraid is a really hard thing to do.
Sure.
I mean, just in our culture at all, and then being a man, and then if you're like a spiritual man, it's like now you've got a lot against you. Like you've got all these tools to not be afraid. You know how to keep yourself, and you're strong and you're tough. And so, like, why would you want to admit that you're afraid? And in that, mostly those mechanisms that have somebody feeling not afraid is like a structural conditioned kind of movement. It's not a real inside out, open, receptive, vulnerable, unprotected, unguarded, where you're actually not afraid because you're actually intimately connected with that threat.
Yeah.
And you're not doing something to overcome it. And so in the dark, it's really like when someone genuinely drops in, there's a membrane that they pass through where they feel helpless because you enter a space where all your typical ways of moving and doing things is not it doesn't match this new space. You move differently. And so there is this space where you just don't know.
Hmm.
And so it's almost, I think it was Suzuki Roshi who said like in the expert's mind, there's not many options, but in the beginner's mind, there's infinite possibilities. And so, we've seen people who have come straight off of Wall Street who have never done plant medicine, never
Yeah.
done breath work. This one particular person's like, I don't even like to meditate. The idea of controlling my mind is like, I don't like it. And he went in, but he had the qualities of honesty and
Right.
sincerity and humility and simplicity and vulnerability. And he passed through this membrane of like huge emotional dump of like shame and despair and anger and sadness. And he didn't have all these mechanisms to manage it and breathe through it and try to change it. It was just like he was just exposed like a baby. It's just like all of it like moving through him. And
Yeah.
within a day, he was like crying from how beautiful this space was that he moved into, where he was in stillness for hours, but like a full, rich, intimate, warm stillness. And I was like, most people meditate. I was talking to him. I was like, most people meditate. Some people who meditate their entire lives never drop into
Did that.
this space. But for him, it wasn't even like he did it. There was no sense of achieving some great
Right.
thing. He's just like,
He wasn't even
it
aware
would
to.
take him by surprise. And we see things like that often, that like it doesn't matter someone's, it's like these sleeping Buddhas. It
Mm,
doesn't matter. They weren't even spiritually oriented, but the circumstances were right and everything was stripped away and something just blossomed that was just right there.
mm.
So that was a long tangent, but that kind of connected to
Yeah.
after my first dark retreat, I was like, I was taken by how challenging it was. And
And
it
can you
really
can
had
you
me like,
explain a little bit as to why it was so challenging? Because again, when you start by saying, "Oh, I was in solitude for 2.5 years," like you would think your resume is perfect
sure,
for this type of experience. Uh, what was challenging, or why was it challenging for you, and specifically?
sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a great, I certainly thought my resume was exactly what it
Good
would need
candidate.
to be. And then
Yeah.
I'll touch that. And then when I started offering dark retreats, in the beginning, it was myself and Adrian, who's a longtime friend, joined me 2 years in and has been in it with me now for, I guess, almost 3 years. That was the type of person I thought was going to come here, is
Right.
people who were similar to me. All I knew was my structure and how it moves in there and what I could see of my structure. What was challenging was what I came to see and what many people come to see who were uh, maybe experienced meditators is that for the most part, not for everyone, but meditation, and maybe it's the Western mind and the Western psyche, but meditation can tend to be a more elaborate, more evolved form of control.
Sure.
You're controlling, and then it's also passing through some lens of someone else's story of how you think you should be. You should be blissful.
Right.
Being spiritual means you have an open heart and you're grateful. But what if it doesn't? What if it
Sure.
means you're angry and you're spiteful? No, that's not spiritual. And so now you have this idea that spiritual, we have our romantic kind of ideals of spirituality from someone else or how we romanticize it, because if we were that way, we would feel important and
Right.
special.
Right.
And so and again, it's not all the time, but like I think if a lot of people looked at this, they would find roots in that like there's this movement to create within ourselves some idealized version. And there's a lot of sincerity in that. So it's not to totally discount it. But if we just took that sincerity, that's a whole nother exploration. But
Mm,
that impulse in us, and so that to to be better, to kind of cover our lack with how we should be. And so for me, I went in there and it was really quickly like the meditation was like I could see how it was almost like there was a trying to like have something be a certain way as opposed to relaxing into how it actually is, which I
mm.
think ultimately meditation is hmm, it's nuanced. And so to say what is meditation and what's not, but like a way of meditation is just this open awareness where you're just attuning to what's here. There's not a trying to fix, change, deepen, transform, or heal. It's
Right.
just a
Nothing to
tender being.
accomplish. Right.
Totally. But I think in the West, we've taken it and now there's an achieving of spirituality. There's a having big experiences because they fill our self-importance. If we're healing and transforming and awakening, we feel important. We're doing good. We feel purposeful and we feel like we're doing good work. And again, not that there's anything wrong with any of this. It's just an uncovering of what's underneath that. Like that we need that because if we didn't have it, we would feel lack. But like, are we fundamentally a being of lack or are we
Mm,
fundamentally whole? And then lack is some cultural overlay
right.
or some, and so when I first went in, there was like, whoa, I actually don't have what it takes to genuinely feel relaxed and safe in here. It was like I'm missing something, but I genuinely feel relaxed and safe when I'm out in the wild and meditating and off in my solitude in nature. But do I really? Or am I doing something? I have a really advanced form of control
Mm,
that has me insulated in a sense of safety. And then you go into the dark, and all of a sudden that gets exposed.
yeah.
And so it was my sincerity that was like, I want to do more of this because I mean, it was also my like that very like achieving spirituality thing that I had at that time that was like, whoa, I know I want to be able to do this. And that propelled me to like want to build a dark retreat. I thought the people who would come would be a bit more like me. And and then I've seen there's been handfuls of people who have lots of meditation experience and are really spiritually inclined, and like I see myself in them and vice versa. There is that where it's almost like it's really held together.
Mm,
And what's interesting is overall, I'd say women have a bit of an easier time in the
mm,
dark than men, or people who are really oriented in their feminine, which tend to be women more than men.
right.
Although they're also, it can go either way, but because there's like the feminine is less apt to like to overcome and try to like strong arm their way through it and to endure, and is going to be more able to soften, to like to be vulnerable and to allow themselves to feel weak, which is not really weak, but this sense of open and unprotected. And so that really propelled me to want to explore more in the dark. And then it's been a constant evolution. Like I
Right.
learned so much from each person that comes through in kind of being with them in their journey.
Ooh, there's a lot to discuss there. Something that you brought up, and I bring this up because it comes up a little bit in some of the work that we do in the space. I find that when people come to us, and it's very different, but from a fundamental position of, I am broken and I need to be fixed, which is why I'm doing this experience, creates a very different experience than from what you said, where like, are we fundamentally broken or are we fundamentally whole? And then things have veiled that wholeness and our perception then becomes lack and pain. And I don't want to downplay experiences that could have been traumatic to some people. That happens. I know that. What then is your perspective even on the idea then of healing?
Mhm.
Because what we and I don't want to be leading in this, but like sometimes even in our work, let's call it plant-based work or personal development work or trauma-informed therapy or any of the above, the example that's always given is, oh, it's like an onion and you peel and then something else comes up and then you peel and then something up comes up. And I call it like the trauma loop, because if you happen to somehow manage to clear all of your issues, Then we get into, well, what about our parents' issues that were passed down? And then beyond that, then it becomes ancestral. And then there's past lives, if you want to get into that and believe in that. And like there's all this stuff. And but the fundamental belief is I am broken and I'm trying to do whatever I can because it's a noble pursuit to find wholeness or healing.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts around, with all the people you've worked with and the work you've done yourself, on the idea of healing? Or we talk a lot about, you talk a lot about movement towards some sort of achievement or a goal or a finish line, and facing the dark kind of, I mean, how I perceive it, haven't been there yet, is this idea of like dismantling the finish line and seeing what happens if you don't pursue. You mentioned like relaxing into things how they are versus trying to change. I know I said a lot there, but what are some of your thoughts around those ideas?
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the first ones that would just be kind of a core thing in there is like, what if it was okay to feel broken?
Hmm.
Like to really sit with that. Like, what if it was okay? What does it feel like to feel broken?
Hmm.
And then what if it was okay to feel that way? Like just noticing what happens, not even like taking, well, this person said it's okay, so it's okay, because again, that's just another
Another.
structure on top of it. We're just adding like, but just like, what if it was okay to feel broken?
Hmm.
And then just noticing what happens in your body. And we're not even saying that it's okay. We're just saying, what
What
if?
if?
And then noticing what happens to your body. What if it was okay to feel broken? Is there like, does one tense up, or is there like a softening and a
Hmm.
relaxing?
Hmm.
Almost like maybe a collapsing, but a collapsing from the resistance of trying to fix. And if one's trying to fix like this, they're only going to create more of
More of
this,
that.
although it might be strong, because typically, like sometimes in our culture, like when we feel strong, it's like it's almost tense and puffed up because we're so much armored up. There's a sense of strength and power, but it's because the whole fragility, the innate fragility is protected. And
Hmm.
so what if we are innately fragile in some way, then like there is an innate part of us that is broken, not at the core, but on some layers, that there is like, what if, then so not to bypass, like what if there is layers of levels of us that are broken in a
Hmm.
sense,
Hmm.
but we're going to view them as broken through a cultural lens. So if you're not using a cultural lens, then broken is kind of irrelevant. It just
Right.
is the way it is.
Right.
But all of that aside, it's just to land and somebody's like, but I feel broken. But it's like, what if that's okay? What if it's okay to feel that way? And then what happens when, like it happens all the time, when someone's in the dark and they're like grappling with something. Some people know they're grappling with something, and other people just have no idea. It's usually clear to me on the other side of the door
Hmm.
from being with a lot of people. There's just fundamental flavors that you can feel. I can feel when someone's genuinely relaxed and open, and when they're kind of more in resistance, but have convinced themselves that they're open and connected, and they really believe they are.
Sure.
And so it's not even like they're faking or lying. It's like they've created a structure, which all of us do all the time, that has us feeling safe, but it's like it's held. It's not like relaxed and open. And so somebody could be in something, and all like we're exploring, asking questions, they're tuning to their body, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I just like they're in their whole chest is like tight.
Hmm.
But they weren't aware of that. They were in something, and we've kind of like I asked them questions about what they're noticing in their body. They've attuned, and they're like, I'm feeling my chest is tight. And then it's like, well, what if it was okay to feel that way? So that's
Right.
another thing, is when somebody feels broken, let's get rid of the story. What does it
Right.
feel like in your body to feel broken? And then what if it's okay to feel that way? And just about everyone, when they're asked that question and they're in the pressure of it, they're like, whoa, I just relaxed. They're like, the pressure just went from a 10 to like a 3.
Hmm.
And then as we stay with it, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, they can notice other parts of their body that are relaxed or soft or they feel safe. And all of a sudden that pressure, in most cases, resolves. But it doesn't resolve from our effort to change it. It resolves from us allowing it to be there. And all of a sudden, this feeling of lack and brokenness has resolved.
Hmm.
And it resolved on its own. And so the there's a lot of sincerity in wanting to heal. And so if we could really move in that sincere movement and not the like, a lot of times there's so much resistance in there. There's sincerity, but it might, in the actual movement of that healing, it might be 1 part sincerity and 9 parts resistance.
Right. Right.
We could swing more to 9 parts, 9 or 10 parts sincerity,
Sincerity.
which would have us just being honest with what it feels like. Our bodies on their own, given the space, will resolve. And then it's not us doing it, it's just happening. But that can feel really threatening
Huh.
because now we don't have a purpose. Healing or being a healer fills us with a really like important purpose. We're doing good work. And like, so there's a lot in there. So one other story in this is there was a high net worth individual who came through here, does a lot of philanthropy. And while he was in the dark, he was sharing how, like, I don't usually feel fear. I don't
Hmm.
feel much fear in my life. My friends do. He was older. He's like, I'd love to get in touch with fear.
Hmm.
And so as we were exploring, I said, well, what if we took your philanthropic organization away? Like it just disappeared. You didn't have that anymore. And he was like, well, I still have my spiritual one-on-one coaching. That's really what's most dear to me. And I said, so we take that away. You can't like relate as that as something you do. And then he was like, whoa, I feel fear now.
Ah.
And so we were in that, like, what does the fear feel like in your body? And then as he started to drop into it, he was just like, but wait, how would I show love if I didn't have those things?
Hmm.
And the question was, right now, there's a scared little boy in you. Would it not be a movement of love to just tend to this scared little boy? And, for me, what it really revealed was just like how even the most good thing in our culture of like philanthropic endeavors of helping
Right.
people created an insulated sense of purpose that covered fear from not being able to show love because when one would really turn towards themselves genuinely,
Yeah.
there's fear. And like, people are like, they know self-love, and but it's like, it's a different thing in the dark where it's like you don't just get to have a couple moments of it. It's like the darkness really reveals ourself to ourself, and we can still have all these things that we insulate in. But this is where like it's so much more than just going into the dark, having somebody who is experienced in being with people in the dark
Hmm.
and who is able to be in that uncovering and not fixated on trying to heal and fix. There's this genuine just letting things resolve on their own and really settling and uncovering. Then there's it just becomes a different journey in the dark. Like, to say it's important where you do your dark retreat, having somebody who is experienced in holding the container is really, I could say, here. And we've really tried to take ourselves out of the equation, but more and more we've realized like it's
You need
important
to
to at
be
least
part of it.
acknowledge like the experiences that people are having here it also has a lot to do with the support and how it's held.
I know there's no quote unquote right way to do it, because then that again attaches purpose and meaning and constructs. But it sounds like if we had to say there was a right way to do it, um, it would be in the letting go of pursuits, the letting go of intentions and expectations, and the
But
relaxing
wait,
and
let's pause there,
okay,
because the letting go can also be another,
sure,
like, now it's like somebody's, because we all get into this way of, like, a kid is always just mimicking and mirroring and performing,
right,
but it's not real for them. It's not like they don't really want to do this thing. They're just
right,
doing it because they want to be seen and fit in. And so now it's like you're supposed to let go. So we perform letting go, but our
yes,
system is actually, so like if there was a right way, and again, like you said, right way has this, now we're gauging, is this right or is this wrong?
yeah,
I mean, the right way would be, if I had to distill it, would be genuinely feeling, genuinely attuning to a felt sense of safety.
mm,
Like, what is it like to genuinely feel safe in your body, safe and connected? Like, if we distilled it down to having a genuine sense of safety and connectivity in the body, because then that can look different. Like, it doesn't matter
right,
what
for
somebody's
everybody,
doing,
yeah,
it doesn't matter how they're organizing it or saying it. It's a unique, intimate experience in someone of feeling safe and connected. Now, how we get there is going to be unique for everyone. So that's
sure,
where, like, we meet everyone where they're at. Like, I could have three people up in the dark and we have three totally different conversations and explorations, and it wouldn't be appropriate. Like, it's totally, because there's no objective. I'm not
right,
trying to heal somebody or transform or get them to see anything. It's genuinely like overall, like, again, one distilled thing would just be like, what if it was okay to feel this way? Like, what happens in your body if it was really okay to feel this way? And then what we see is, for many people, how threatening simplicity is.
sure,
Like, in the world, if you're just simple, then you don't have status. There's not like all these levels of gauging, I am good and worthy. And then within spirituality, you're not having big experiences and transforming and awakening and achieving enlightenment. So, like, it's amazing to see how threatening simplicity is. But, like, are we fundamentally simple or are we fundamentally special?
right,
And, like,
right,
you know, I would lean more in that I mean, we are special, but not in the sense of like a self-importance. It is in the simplicity. And so it's amazing to see from all the cultural overlays how threatening simplicity is. And so, to touch on what you said, like, if there was a right way, it would be more this exploration of, what if it was okay to feel this way? And, like, what does it feel like in my body to feel
mm,
safe,
mm,
to feel connected? Another exploration we kind of lean into here is, what does it feel like in your body to receive? Because in receiving, although somebody could make receiving into a
a
spirit, like
thing too, yeah,
a spiritual a thing too, but, like, it's a little bit harder, like, because it's just, you don't get to do anything. You're just like letting it in.
uh,
And all of a sudden you don't have this grand purpose because now you have to let anything in. And it's like, what if what mattered more than what was happening was the quality of your connection to what's happening? And then the emphasis really shifts. It's not as big of a deal of what's happening, but what's more important is the quality of the connection to what's happening. And then we lean more into those qualities. And all of a sudden you can be broken and have so much lack and be relaxed.
yeah,
Now, all of a sudden, that lack and sense of brokenness is genuinely okay. It's not like higher perspective, it's okay. It's like you feel it's okay in your body with having lack. And then you're not so fixated on changing the lack because there's a sense of wholeness. And maybe that changes the lack, or there is an evolution from that wholeness. But even if there wasn't, you're still human, you have lack and all this conditioning, but you know something deeper, that
Yeah.
something that precedes all of our cultural conditioning, which like we are going to view our lack through.
And it sounds like that is ultimately, and I want to be careful with words, right? Because there are no goals to accomplish. But it sounds like if the takeaway from a darkness retreat, because in the moment you're face to face with being connected and being okay, connected to your body, being okay with whatever is, and feeling safe, that feels like that is the gift that the retreat can give you to take into your everyday life. Because now, because like one of the concerns that a lot of people have, including myself, is from a peak experience or some spiritual something or other or whatever it is. It's how do you relate the mountaintop experience to the marketplace? It's like we can't live in the dark 24/7. We can't be on the mountaintop 24/7. So, you know, what tends to happen is, oh, peak experience. Okay, back in the valley. Oh, all this stuff has hit me. Let me go back up for another peak experience somewhere. But it seems like the gift is if you can be connected to your body, relaxed into whatever that is, and being okay with that, that's a gift that no matter what you're doing, where you are, making deals on the boardroom table, traveling with your family, cooking breakfast, having a swim, like that is, I mean, that truly is a gift. I don't know any way other to put it. Would that be somewhat accurate?
Yeah, I'd say like the that would be the gift. And one of the gifts that the darkness really brings forward is like knowing yourself beyond experiences.
Yeah,
Like when
right.
you're looking for peak experiences, I mean,
Right.
it's a really beautiful form of consumerism. You're consuming. I mean, one could also say that about the dark retreat, but when you go there, it's certainly not a big, beautiful peak experience.
Sure.
It's a very confronting one. It is an experience, but it's like you begin to touch into what's underneath experience, like
Experience.
what remains. Like
Right.
we're talking experiences that come and go, peak experience, not all, but you begin to, the quality of connection is always there to all these different experiences. And because the only thing that you have in your external environment is vast, it's infinite, it's eternal, it's
Yeah.
unchanging. You have the darkness. So
Yeah.
you have this reflection of something that is fundamentally present and and infinitely deep. Like when someone really settles in the dark, they drop into deeper and deeper levels of tenderness, connectivity, and intimacy, qualities. Now they do create experiences, which
Sure.
are really subtle and tender and beautiful. And they do create a residue when somebody goes out and they're missing those experiences.
Mm.
And someone also came to know themselves at a deeper level and rested in it. It wasn't like they were holding on for dear life as they were rocketing off that mountain. It was like they like laid down in it. They made a bed in it. They discovered a new home in themselves. Now that did produce experiences, but when they're honest, those experiences emerged out of that new resting place. And that new resting place kind of awakened, it kind of that new resting place emerged when they just allowed everything to be here and settled into what was kind of precedes
All
all of that.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you,
so there is that, like there are experiences that are really deep and beautiful,
sure.
and one begins to see that they emerge out of a deeper level of their being, and one has a real intimate connection with that. Although there's a lot of resistance keeping us from that because there's a lot that we don't want to include, and there's a lot that we get from having beautiful, big, important purposes.
Yeah, I've got a great question around purpose, but When you speak about coming to know yourself, from all your experience, what are your understandings? Because, like, there's a lot of this talk of the ego, the separated self. When you talk about knowing yourself in this experience, are you talking about knowing that eternal, infinite, shared oneness, beingness that we all participated in? Or are we talking about the Nick? I'm getting to know who Nick is as a separated individual with structures that create this identity that make me feel like I'm separate from everything else. I don't know if that question's making
Sure.
sense, but when you say that know
Yeah.
thyself, or know yourself, who is it that we're actually coming to know?
Yeah, I mean, I think both, like, no matter what kind of experience people have in there, they come to see and know their conditioning in a way that they haven't. So the Nick, which is, we're
Right.
just culturally conditioned. It's
Yeah.
not like everything that we think and want and feel is good and right moves through a lens,
Right.
right? It's and so one starts to see all of that.
For what it
Now
is.
it's yeah, for what it
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it matters potentially.
Sure.
Um, but it's there, and then what happens is we come up against our conditioning of like, this isn't good, this isn't right, I'm not supposed to feel this. And so there's resistance, and then from the resistance, there may be this movement to heal and awaken and fix and change, or to manage, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
When there's a genuine movement to like, what does that feel like in the body? And then like, so the story kind of goes, there's a connection with what it feels like. There's a genuine allowing. There's like a real letting it in. Then one begins to get in touch with that part of themselves that can let it in.
Mm.
Like, what is that part that receives? What is that part that lets it in? And and then from that, there is one drops into deeper levels of what they are. Like, I think we then begin to go beyond who we are, our
Right.
conditioning, and
Right.
there's almost this what that some people at times begin
To
to touch in
explore.
there that goes
Wow.
beyond the persona. So I think both get to be known, and the levels of what we are we could see is just infinitely deep, and so it's it's never ending. And then from this level we may see this and the conditioning and how we organized it, and then it just keeps going from there.
Yeah. You mentioned, like, at first when you describe a dark retreat, it feels almost like sensory deprivation, right? There's no sight involved. Yes, there's touch. There's, to a certain degree, no sound involved. And the perception that I have, and again, yeah, I'm trying not to do it, but my mind goes to the place of like, how am I going to react? What's going to happen? What's this going to, like, there's that, and I'm terrified on one hand, excited on the other. I don't even know. But my perception is the darkness is void, but I know that's not true. And I know you even said, and I don't know if I quoted this exactly earlier in the conversation, but you said the dark is alive. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's something that a lot of people say when they go in their own
Yeah.
words,
Yeah.
but it is something that surprises everyone, where it's like, it's not like dead, like it feels
Like there's an awareness or
luminescent.
something
Although
there.
it's still dark, it's like there's scintillating. It's like, and who knows, is that just our eyes being habituated to seeing things? Like, I don't know, but
Mm,
like it doesn't feel like black, like a void. Like there,
right.
it does feel filled with, like it's more like a substance than
Mm,
like just devoid nothingness.
yeah.
And yeah, so it's there's a lot in there, and I think a lot of people tend to be surprised
Hmm.
in that. And one thing to touch in on that is like, some people do have visuals, some people do see lights. I'd say for most people, they find them to be distracting.
Right.
Like, although in someone's mind, they're like, but I'd love this peak experience and you have like all these lights. But again, like what people, when somebody really drops in the dark, it is the stillness, it is the quietness, it is when all that's gone that
Mm,
somebody can attune to what precedes all
all
of the
of it.
phenomena.
All of it.
And
Yeah.
then so like in that there's so much subtlety and tenderness that's so subtle that in the bigness of peak experiences and bright lights, it like we don't touch it. Now from that place, it can birth. People do have peak experiences in there.
Hmm.
And these they're different. And it's really what people return to, like this simple, rested, tender space. And so a lot of people, when they have the lights, like they want them to go away.
Right.
That's not to say some people have really cool visuals in there. They're like, wow, that was amazing. But that's not the thing that they take away. They're not like riding on this. There's something else that really is what delivers somebody to this newness.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I feel like we can talk about this forever. Maybe a few more questions then. Uh,
Sure.
I had this idea, and I think it kind of sinks in where for so many years of my life, I was looking for purpose. And I think this is kind of a general sentiment amongst most, at least North Americans. It's like you're put on this planet for a purpose, go find that purpose, and then live it out. And then we highlight all these examples of people doing great things and saying, look, that person is doing their purpose. And to me, it feels like there's a finish line to be crossed on our last final breath, and we either finish it and somebody somehow somewhere gives us a high five and said you did it, or you didn't and now you're judged and like you just wasted your life. And I kind of had this thought that I'm wrestling with over the last several weeks or months of like, what if purpose is the problem instead of the solution? Because I feel like, at least for me, and for those close to me, it's oftentimes the source of a ton of stress. Like, hey, I've got to achieve, I've got to seek, I've got to find. If I don't find, then what now? And will I be judged? And what will people think of me if I don't show up saying I've got purpose? And people would always ask me, Nick, what are your dreams and goals and aspirations? I'm like, yeah, I kind of have some, but I rather, and not as a cop out, but I'm like, I'd rather just kind of live in this moment and see how life unfolds and kind of go with that. What's your take, knowing the dark and knowing all the things that we talked about, knowing that for whatever reason there seems to be a perpetual seeking in the human, um, probably because of constructs and ideas. Seeking might or might not be related to this idea of purpose. But what's your take on this idea of purpose? And could it be, and again, I hate to use these kind of words, but more the problem than solution, or more destructive than beneficial?
Mhm. I mean, I think there's like I've said a few times, like there is a thread of sincerity
Yeah, right.
in purpose,
Right.
right? Like there is a goodness in it. And again, we have to like there's the purpose to just like to draw different lines. Like there's the purpose of achieving massive wealth and like just being really wealthy. There's that kind of purpose. There's the purpose of like doing good in the world. There's the purpose
Right.
of healing and transforming and awakening. Like they all have their different things. And the person achieving great wealth might like it might be for their family so they can provide, whatever it is. Like there's still not to write that off. There could still
Yeah,
be a
got it.
goodness, and that one thing is better than another would go through my personal lens, which is just another lens,
Right.
so which would be unique to my conditioning and upbringing and such. So like there is a thread of sincerity and all of that in that movement towards purpose. And then when somebody's in their purpose, there's a sense of meaning.
Right.
And so, right. And then there's a sense of feeling meaningful when you're in your purpose. Now, are we fundamentally beings that are filled with meaning? Are we fundamentally beings that are devoid of meaning, that need to do things to feel meaningful?
Mm,
Like a little baby, does it need much to feel meaningful? Is it
sure.
just
Right.
naturally
Right.
intimate, connective, as long as it has a sense of safety? And a baby needs to co-regulate mostly for a sense of safety. So if it's held, it's like
Fine.
it's not searching, it's not devoid of meaning.
Right.
We're not
Right.
fundamentally devoid of meaning.
Great
And
point.
so that movement of purpose, so there's this thread of sincerity where we know somewhere in us that there is this feeling of meaning.
Right.
And so there's this sincere movement to return to meaning. And then but now we're doing all these different things, this purpose, achieve this, accomplish that. And again, there's nothing wrong in it. There is a sincere movement
Right.
to return to meaning. And but now we're doing all these things. And one of the explorations in the dark at times is I'll ask somebody like, what matters most to you? What's most important to you? And then we'll distill that down, like
Mm,
whatever it is to somebody. And then it's like, why? And when somebody's in the dark, like somebody on their deathbed, all of a sudden achieving and progressing might not be that meaningful
right.
unless somebody comes here and they're at their height of their career and they're really just in that. But like sometimes that gets peeled back too. And then like all of a sudden they think of their loved ones and their connections and their relationships. And it's like, this is what matters most, being with my family or being out fishing with my uncle or whatever it is. And then this exploration of what happens in you. What does that give you when you have this thing that matters most to you?
Mm,
And when somebody follows that thread, they return to a sense of connection in their body. And so if we distill down everyone, like when somebody achieves their purpose, they've got their dream, what's happening in your body is there's a sense of connectivity,
right.
a sense of warmth, and then meaning is there. This thing didn't just give you meaning. It was like a prompt. It was this thing that invoked the meaning that was already inside of you. And so that's not to say stop achieving and accomplishing, because again, that would be another overlay of you don't need that. Like follow what's real,
Yeah.
right? And not just like, I don't need that to find meaning. We could still find meaning in things. There's just like also this exploration or maybe this inclusion that perhaps meaning is in me.
Already
And this
there.
exploration of really beginning to, if we're pushing things away and grabbing at certain things, just beginning to notice that and notice like maybe we even pause for like not having behavioral modifications, because again, that's a different structure, but maybe we pause for 5-10 seconds and just notice, and then we do the thing. But like sometimes there was somebody up there last week and somebody who definitely was not the person I had in mind who would be coming to do a dark retreat when I
Ah,
started it 5 years ago. Just not, has never done plant medicine, not spiritually oriented in the traditional sense of how we think of somebody as spiritually oriented. Never done breath work, none of no meditation. He just saw the videos. He was like, there's something there. I'm
yep.
curious. I want to go.
Yep.
Very mental person too. And he came, and while he was in the dark and we were chatting, he was like, I'm like, I always am writing things out to work out my thoughts and I can't write in here. And like he was having a hard moment. And I said, let's just like imagine right now that you're working it out in your mind, like and exaggerate that feeling in your body of you working it out
Mm,
and tell me what's happening. He's like, my shoulders are up and it's just like I'm tense. And I said, and just hold that posture, like just hold it and exaggerate it. And when it naturally moves in you to let it go, not because you have to or you should, but there's something in you that has just had enough tension. And then all of a sudden he's like, whoa, my shoulders went down and I'm
mm,
smiling and I'm sitting tall. And he's like, and my mind is totally clear and empty. And it's just like, let's just hang out here. And, all of a sudden, all of that, there wasn't this thing. And so, yeah, to allow ourselves to still do that thing, but if we take a pause or
right.
exaggerate it, we can begin to see our conditioning more. So anyway, that was a long-winded, like,
I love it though.
this exploration for purpose. I think if we can begin to really touch that there is a sincere movement in it, and just begin to even, like, even if we just sat without the thing, like we went to what brings us the most meaning, and we started to just get more familiar with what it feels like in our body when we're in contact with meaning. And we can just, even if we're imagining it, but like we start to see, like, the fact that we can imagine it
Right.
and it happens in our body
And it's there.
is
Yeah.
certainly like evidence that we don't actually need that thing. It lives in us. And then we can begin to allow ourselves to be in these levels of meaning. And one of the it when you did the intro, it reminded me of this quote sometimes I'll share of Suzuki Roshi, who brought Zen Buddhism to the West. He
Mm,
used to say, the most important thing is remembering the most important thing.
I love that. Do you have time for a couple more, or should we
Yeah,
wrap?
yeah, go for it.
Two very distinct directions I want to go, which I think will bring great closure to this. One is completely unrelated. And what I mean by that is most of the people who are listening and watching this are business folk. Um, uh, some may have some slants towards the breath work and the plant-based stuff, and some seeking. I'm going to guess that a lot do not. The two questions I want to ask is, one, you've built something very impressive here. And what I mean by that is you're the first dark retreat location in the US. You have a 3+ year wait list, of which I'm on. I'm waiting. I left my deposit. I'm ready to go. You've had very well-known people come through your space to do this work. The first question, again, unrelated to everything we've been talking about so far, is, are you aware of how you've done that? Because again, every business owner would be sitting here saying, gosh, that Scott guy figured it out. He's done something great, something remarkable. He's got a wait list. People want to work with him. Is there any tidbits of advice or understanding or knowings that came from building this thing you now have that can be passed on even from that perspective? Then the second question, to kind of bring closure to it, is uh, who is this for? Right? Because I'm sure there's people sitting here saying, sounds interesting. I might not be spiritual. I might not do this. I might not do that. Is it for me? And then I guess the last parting words are, knowing that I'm going to be coming to see you at some point in the next little while. What are your parting words for me? So those are the three distinct ones, and then we'll just bring it all to a close.
Yeah. I think in what has made this what it is,
Yeah,
um, and the popularity, I mean, I'd say one thing, I mean, clearly it's the videos.
sure.
And so it is, I mean, there's a lot behind the scenes that has somebody having those experiences that creates those videos, but where it's like, it's not me telling the story about how
Yeah,
amazing Dark Retreat is,
right.
because if it was just me, I would just be telling my story, and it would go through my lens. Like, I still have all of my filters and conditions and the things that move me to make me feel self-important. Like, those things are still in me.
Yep.
And so it would just be me. But now we have like 200 to 300 people telling their story. And since I've been with them all too, like, their stories live in me, and have
Yeah,
like learned so much from them, and I've been able to distill their stories and share them in different ways. And now it's like, all of a sudden, like, if it was just me, it would just be maybe like people who are like spiritual seekers in the same way that I am, and they're like tend towards this way, and like, and so, but since it's this bigger picture of so many different people, I think the way that it's come forward touches so many people. And because we do our best within ourselves, and the way we hold it is that, like, we're not wanting to add more
right,
different ideas and philosophies and spiritualities, and like, you should be this way and spirituality looks like this, and like, so
right.
now all of a sudden it touches so many more people because there's like an openness. It's like everything's welcome,
Come as you
everything
are.
in everyone's welcome. You don't need to be a certain way. And so I think that has also really touched and really moved people. And so there's a real meeting people where they're at.
Right.
And all of that has created the types of experiences that people have, and then sharing those experiences where somebody's like, whoa, like I want to feel like that
Mm.
level of vulnerability and connectivity. And so into the next kind of um, question of like, who's it
Who's
for?
it for?
Well, I guess I could pause. Like, does that answer, that first question?
It does. I mean, it's just, I think the emphasis is just literally being, you have something that is beautiful. It's for everybody, and you're allowing the people that experience it share their experience. I mean, because as far as I know,
Hmm.
you're only marketing are these really short snippets of the moment somebody comes off and takes off. Like, it's so simple yet so profound. In business marketing talk, you have a beautiful product that
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
affecting people in a very beautiful way. So there's no need for the flash bang, exciting,
Totally.
hey, look at me and I'm Scott and this is my story and here's why this is important. Um,
Well,
you know,
now I think that is one thing that sets this aside. And that where like I hear it from many people who come here. Some people don't care, they want the flash and the bang, but like I think that's what has us touching such a wide audience is
yeah,
because people don't see that. And they're like, that is the whole, we're not looking for a flash and a bang. It's like we're moving into the simplicity. And so there's something in that like has people settle and feel safe and
yeah,
then like want to step forward into this. And then that kind of goes into like, who's this for?
yeah.
I mean, ultimately for anyone, but somebody has to want it. Like you really you got to want to see, you have to want to see. And like, so not like necessarily wanting to heal or transform or awaken, because that may exclude wanting to see,
Right.
because so like I think fundamentally, like wanting to see, wanting to be with yourself as you are, genuinely curious. Some people come here and they're just curious. They're like, I saw those videos and I'm just like, whoa, like I'm just curious. How does somebody feel like that? I mean, we've had many men come here before. And they're just like, I've heard like my wife has talked to me about feelings and what it's like to
Mm,
feel. And like, I don't even know what that means. And then they go through and they're like, I know now what it's like to feel, like to have a felt experience. And so from like the guy on Wall Street to like, just about there's somebody here from the Midwest who's a devout Christian to like, I mean, just the full gamut,
right.
because there's a genuine curiosity, there's a sincerity, there's an openness to exploring like what happens when I strip so much away, what's there. So that I guess there's this fundamental sincere movement to see
Mm,
without having something to show for yourself. I
right.
mean, all of that can be there. There's people who come and they want a peak experience and they have a really hard time in there. And then there's people who come and they want a peak experience and they get completely devastated and broken and like awakened to something totally brand new and beautiful. So that's not to discount like it adds a lot of extra challenge when you're coming with now everyone has expectations. Even if we don't have spiritual expectations, we don't
Right.
expect to
Same
like
thing.
be afraid. We're not coming here expecting to be afraid. And then so is our expectation to not be afraid going to cover the fact that maybe we are. So, it's
Right.
not to like not have any expectations. They're there. The more we're aware of them, because we kind of can see our fantasies and how we romanticize things. So, yeah, this sincere movement to see, to be with, and then yeah, like I said, there's some people who come and they want to sleep, they want to rest. I mean, we have celebrities who come or high net worth individuals who are just like, I just want to unplug. I don't want to have to be responsible for anyone. And I've heard it from a few like high net worth business people who come through and they're just like, to have a few days where I didn't have to be responsible and tend to anyone or
Right.
anything. And then what happened in me, they're like, I didn't even know what it was like to relax. Like I've been on vacations and stuff, but like this was another level of relaxation. And some people that feels threatening. So it's different for everyone what happens of how we're structured. But like, yeah, and people come for different reasons. And when we're really willing, like sincerely willing to just be with and notice, at least just notice when we're trying to change it,
Mm.
there can be so much in there that we begin to uncover. And so the last question was, oh, if you have anything to
No,
that
no, no.
before I,
That was it. I guess it'd be the most beautiful way I could figure out to wrap this up is I know you're talking to me, but there's going to be a bunch of people who say, "Well, I want to do this too," and they enroll, and there's a waiting period. So, yeah, what are those words to
yeah,
the
so
person
I
who's
mean
going to be there?
there's a waiting period. We are in the process of exploring an expansion. We have the permits on our neighboring land to build. We're just kind of waiting to finalize some more details before we do that. My hope is that like, and my fantasy is that we would have these new caves well before you'd come. We'll see about that. So hopefully that wait is shorter than it actually appears to be right now. And so in terms of like preparing or beginning to orient, it's like, I mean, I think getting familiar with one way is like beginning to dive into somatic therapy or
Mm.
just getting familiar with it. There's some resources on our website. There's some people in that world that we really love and feel like they do um, kind of provide some fundamental tools of somebody beginning to notice that they actually feel very unsafe and unsettled in their body and that most of the things we do out of anxiety and shame,
Right.
which is fine, but just to begin to notice that. And then these different explorations of genuinely feeling safe in our body and recognizing when we don't and how we move. So really like instead of, ways to control our conditioning, just ways of starting to notice it and explore it. So kind of that somatic therapy world is can be one way.
Mm.
um, Another is, I mean, sometimes just whether it's outside on the earth, that's a nice way. It could be inside, wherever it is, of just like laying down and just attuning to like what's happening in my body and beginning to like feel the body and without a way of controlling, just allowing one's awareness to like move with whatever's presenting and just being with that, where the primary quality is relaxing with.
Right.
Even if mind's just running. I mean, there was somebody up here, I think it was that same guy who was really mental and he wanted to write out all his thoughts and like work it all out. And when one of the days I went up and he's just like, I've been, pendulating back to my body and rested and then in my mind. And it's like right now my mind's going wild and I'm trying to like get back to where it was. And I said, what if it was okay?
Mm.
What if it was okay that your mind was running wild? And then he's just like, whoa, my whole body just relaxed. And within a minute, he was just like, my mind's still again, and I'm in my body. So, like,
Mm.
not that we're even trying to control the mind, we're just starting to notice and like, what does it feel like to relax? And then just like allowing. So, just it's hard to prepare, but I think beginning to attune to the body
Right.
and beginning to just spend time laying down's nice, especially for meditators who are used to when they get up in the upright, they're getting to work and they're controlling and like, so
Mm.
just really disarming that and just relaxing, which then is hard to gauge. Are we actually preparing and progressing in our preparing? Because we're just relaxing and not much gets done when we relax. So it's like, it's we definitely hit these membranes that just don't make sense through our normal lens.
Yeah, I love this so much. I know we didn't get the chance, because I'm sure people watching this have 1,000,001 questions. And the reason I didn't bring some of those up is because they're all available on your website. Like, how does this happen? How long do I stay? How long should I be there? How do I get fed? That's all taken care of. That's all viewed on the website, which is kind of how I want to close this, is for the person who's watching, and maybe you're like me, where you don't have all the answers and you don't know, but you know you want to do it. There's some intuition, some calling, some alignment, however you want to word it. What are that person's next steps? How can they get involved? How can they find out more? How can they reserve a spot? Where do they need to go to do all that?
Get on our website, skycaveretreats.com, and just sending us an email from there, and we can explore the next availabilities, get you on the standby list. And I think of, like, for learning more, like getting on the website, there's a couple, I mean, it's pretty detailed where we break down a lot. And also there's one tab that I think it has like 150 short, 45-second to a minute and a half videos of people coming out. And then there's another tab that has 60 or 70 longer videos, 5 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And so really, like, you're going to find at least one person that, like, you really connect with, who shares something that you're like, wow, like that person had that kind of experience. And then to really see how dynamic and diverse that it's not just spiritual people or people into breath work or people into plant medicine or whatever it is. It's like, it's people who are just really genuinely moved to explore, like, their fundamental humanity and what's there kind of when we turn out the lights.
Literally. Yeah. Scott, I want to thank you so much for your time and what you've extended here. I also just want to acknowledge the work that you're doing. I think it's beautiful work, even though I haven't experimented with it yet. I look forward to having another conversation with you post experience and to work all that out. I'm going to end maybe a different way. Usually I end by saying, remember, there's only so many hours in a day, so stop wasting them and focusing only on the bottom line. But why don't we just say focus on what matters most, and that is what matters most. I appreciate your time, Scott. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Bottom Line Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.